Karilyn Crockett, who will be speaking on the topic Filling in the Gaps, Youth Contributions to the Study of Our History.
I will share with you a few of my reflections on some of the work that I've been fortunate enough to do in Boston, and want to talk a little bit about what we remember, what our collections are for remembering, and how we think about our history, right? And what are some real opportunities to shake that up a little bit by really engaging young people at the forefront of that work. So welcome. We're going to see, we're going to save a little bit of time at the end for some questions. Hopefully we can have a discussion, and I will take it from there. And I want to say thank you in advance to Erica, who is my assistant here. She's going to be powering through our slides, so we have like a two-part act going on here. So this is today's topic, filling in the gaps, youth contributions to the study of our history. And as Erica has mentioned to you, I have done some work with young people in the neighborhoods, in the nonprofit world, and also have really learned from that work, and that has used that basis to really deepen my graduate school and doctoral studies. So there are a couple different projects that I'm going to highlight, and we're just going to go right through. So go ahead. So, new pathways and new directions, I would say, for studying and sharing Boston's living history. That's what I'm going to start to offer you. Yeah. What's the issue? So we need a wider distribution of contemporary multi-class and multiracial stories of Boston. It is wonderful to be standing here today in the old South Meeting House. It's auspicious, wonderful, kind of early colonial history. And we do a really great job of our colonial history, some would say. And we do a really great job of our revolutionary history. But then after that, not so much. So we need to really think about some of the contemporary and living history of the city and how to get those stories out in a way that's wider, deeper, broader, more inclusive. We have significant archival gaps in our existing 20th century history collections across the city. I've had the privilege to go through many archives in our city, about a dozen of them, and we have pieces of things that tell us about the 19th century or the 20th century, but there's lots of stuff that's missing. And so I thought about some of my work as an opportunity to think about some of these gaps, to kind of think about the stories that are missing and to figure out creative ways of doing some investigation. Yeah. Okay. So there's some small issues that were at play while I was working on this too. The organization that Erica mentioned, MYTOWN, existed for about 15 years and then failed. So the organization did really great work. We were able to provide about 350 jobs for high school students across the city, and they were able to do research on their family history and local history, turn those stories into walking tours, and shared those tours with about 14,000 people, and that was great. And then about a couple years ago, the organization closed. So I was gone away to grad school, and then we've had to try to think about what to do next, kind of what are the possibilities for this work. So there are some questions in there about our own collections. The other thing, which was a smaller issue, is my own dissertation. So while I was in grad school, trying to figure out how to do research on communities that, again, were underdocumented and how young people could be a part of that. So these were two of the smaller issues that were driving my work to think about these broader issues in the archive and historical documentation. So, two projects came out of this. Two projects really focused on reclaiming and preserving what we would consider more contemporary or living history. So we looked at some formal institutional archives, looking at Boston's activist social justice history, looking at the archives at Northeastern, at UMass Boston, at Roxbury Community College in Suffolk. And then we did some informal family archive works, looking at housing history in the city from the perspective of residents and looking at migration stories. Again, these projects are really driven by young people using their own questions, their own research skills, and really developing a critical lens for understanding history and how to share it with larger audiences. Okay, get ready. Project number one, building an archive. So this project was really coming out of, again, an organizational failure. So when MYTOWN ceased operations, we found ourselves with a ton of documentation that the young people had collected for almost 15 years. Interviews with their family members, photographs, different kind of maps of their neighborhoods. And the question was, if this organization is not existing in terms of doing programming, what to do with all this rich material that's been developed and authored by young people. So this was project number one. So last summer, we launched this project called Curating the City, and it was an opportunity for a group of high school students, 8 of them, to work with me to look at MYTOWN's existing archives, again, a youth-authored archive, and to think about how those collections could be deepened by further investigation at university archives. So this is actually a screenshot of their blog. A part of their documentation was to keep a daily phone blog. It was powered by their cell phones. So these are images from their cell phones, and they did some writing to kind of talk about the research process and also document what they were doing. So there were 8 young people. They were called youth curators. They were literally curating the city, but curating the archival collections inside of our organization and looking at other collections inside of universities. And they did 4 things. Their work was to review, research, and share MYTOWN's archives that I mentioned to you, and then to revive this youth-led walking tour that we had been doing around Columbus Avenue by injecting it with new research. Then they worked on documenting the histories of their families. And as I mentioned, they authored this daily photo blog that was documenting the process, which was a really powerful way to capture what was happening in real time and to allow a larger audience into our work. So these are the 8 young people. They went through our archives, and these are the university archives that we work with. You can see there. Yeah. So project number 1, this was a project that, if this was after school, they would be here presenting their work. So you have to just deal with me. I'm sorry for you. So this is me kind of parroting a little bit of their experiences. They actually made these slides that I'm going to walk you through, so I'm just kind of sharing their presentation with you. So Taya Downey and her crew worked at Suffolk, looking at the Joe Moakley papers, which cover a lot of the time when of the busing stories. And so there are a lot of constituents, Moakley's constituents, that were writing to him really upset about the busing crisis, and so they were going through those files as a way to understand what was going on in this very kind of contentious moment in Boston history. That's a picture of Taya dealing with her documents, trying to figure out which of the documents related to busing in Boston that she wanted to highlight. The students were really interested in thinking about what was going on in busing and kind of whether people felt like it was a success or not a success, and what were some of the ways that people articulated their issues. Yeah. So these are some of Taya's points. She was trying to learn about, again, obviously racial integration of Boston Public Schools. As a current Boston Public School student herself, she was very curious about this. Taya is a sophomore at the John D. O'Brien School, and she really was struck by, again, a lot of the letters and a lot of the articles that were coming out around busing. So what they did is they went through, they pulled out about 4 or 5 documents that they wanted to do a close reading on. They scanned those documents and they added them to a website. So this is just their notes. This is Taya's notes about that. And so she says, this is her saying some of what she learned through doing the research and giving tours. She talks about how it helped her with background knowledge on the city, gave her more confidence when giving tour stops, and helped her become more aware of the topics that she was covering when she was giving tours to the public. Yeah. For her, a lot of this was about building up her confidence and talking to folks, and so she's highlighting that, and she had lots of slogans about not giving up when it gets tough in the archive or dealing with people on the street, and she felt like it was really important to have a chance to gain knowledge about herself and everything that's around you. Yeah. This is the second research project that was run by Michelle Zhang, who was a sophomore also at Boston Latin School. Michelle was 15 at the time. She went to look at the Via Victoria archive at Northeastern. Many of you will know that Via Victoria was a housing development in the South End, and a really significant history there because a predominantly Puerto Rican community that came together in 1968 to basically stop urban renewal from clearing them out of the neighborhood. The residents there, you can go to the next slide, I think she has. Yeah, there's Michelle. So this is her profile. So the residents of Via Victoria were able to successfully incorporate themselves into the Emergency Tenant Council in 1969, and were able to wrestle from the BRA the right to develop their own home. So one of the things that this crew was interested in was what were the different modes of protesting, like where people were really violent. A lot of the students had this question about organizing and civil disobedience and protesting, and they said that they were surprised to find out that the residents who were living in what was Parcel 19 beforehand had done a really incredible job of fundraising. Actually, as a part of their protest, they were gaining monies from private individuals, from foundations, to help them actually develop out what would be their alternative blueprint for the redevelopment of their neighborhood. And so the students start pulling out these financial documents, actually, which was really interesting, and they became very taken by this kind of financial backstory of organizing. So there's an example of one of Michelle's documents there. Also, this is just Michelle showing you what Parcel 19 or Via Victoria looks like today. And then a few things that she said she learned. They all talk a little bit about the challenge, the hardness, the perseverance it takes to make the archives speak to you and give you the information that you want, and just had all of these great slogans for each other about never give up, keep going, it'll work out. So you have this sense that we're on this very arduous journey, which we were, but ultimately that was very rewarding for them, I would say. And Michelle was someone who felt like the research really helped her as a tour guide, helped her have more information, and that there was a real benefit to that, and that she felt more familiar with the information and more comfortable with thinking about deeper questions and actually having more complicated commentary at the different tour stops. Yeah. And the last piece was Rakima Noor's looking at the Mel King papers at Roxbury Community College. Rakima was really interested in Mel King's mayoral campaign in 1983 and took the time to just go into the archives there at RCC and try to get a sense of what was happening on the campaign. She was particularly interested in looking at the issues that Mel King was addressing. This is a picture of Rakima. She's 19 at the time, a rising freshman at Roxbury Community College, so the older person on the crew, which she was constantly letting people know. She was older, she was not in high school, so I have to mention that here. Yeah. So yeah, this is one of the documents that Rakima had pulled out of the archive and scanned, just giving them a better sense of what it was like for Mel King to be on the campaign trail and what were some of the issues. She and her crew were really interested in the fact that Mel King made this special outreach to young people and put that as a really foregrounded set of issues in the campaign. Yeah. This is some of Rakima's notes on Mel King. I know many of you in this room are familiar with him. Rakima was really taken by the fact that she, living in the South End, for her, Mel King was her neighbor. She had seen him all the time but had no idea really who he was in terms of his political biography, and felt that this was an incredible opportunity to know who that guy was across the street from her. And so was really happy to be able to get a much more deeper sense of what Mel King's contributions were and continue to be, and was able to actually go and do an interview with him as a part of this process too. And so then they would just go and sit in the library, sit in the office, and then go outside. So that was kind of the overall cycle of this work, constantly indoors, outdoors, thinking, talking, writing, on and on and on for 50 days straight. Yes. And then a lot of this work was shared through tours. So they were on the street with public audiences of adults, of peers, of younger people, letting people have an experiential opportunity to kind of think about these stories, think about all the changes of the 20th century, think about many battles to kind of resist urban renewal, to resist highway expansion, to resist a lot of what we think of as the seminal moments of the late 20th century, and how communities have offered really viable alternatives to that. And this is just some of what we learned, what actually young people learned. They talked about how much information that they were able to pick up that they had never heard before in classrooms or anywhere else. They also talked about how incredible it was to see adults really listening to them, for them to be the teachers, for adults to have to be quiet when they speak, and how powerful it felt for them to really be kind of the masters of information and really commanding an audience. Go to the next slide. Yeah. They also talked about how amazing it was to go to different places. This first quote here is actually Taya talking about going to New York. We took a trip to the Brooklyn Historical Society so they could learn about another historical organization in another place. And for Taya, she had never been out of the city of Boston before. There were a couple other young people like that. And we also spent a lot of time, which, I mean, it's great, but we also spent a lot of time going to different neighborhoods in the city. And a lot of young people had said they had never even been to other areas of the city. This is a problem in our city that we know continues. And so this was another way to shake that up. So just kind of giving you a flavor of what they said was some of the value of what they did this summer. Yeah. Next slide. And then I will not go through all this, but they actually poured a lot of this insight into a website that they made called Curating the City. And so the website will show you a scan of all the documents. So each crew chose 4 or 5 documents, again, to really look at very closely and to raise up some questions for the public. So for each set of their documents, they're asking the public a larger question about, well, what do you think? What would you do differently? And they also created an audio document that allows them to try to bring people inside the energy and the history of a live moment. Yeah. Okay. So project number 2. So project number 1, as I just showed you, is really about MYTOWN's archives being reclaimed and connected to existing university archives and trying to make new public history and new public conversation and teaching out of that. And number 2 was a project with young people that was more closely related to some of my own dissertation work, where I was taking a lot of the methods of MYTOWN's work and bringing them into graduate level study and actual writing as well. So there was a couple lost archives that I encountered on the way of doing a larger project that was about the Boston anti-highway movement. And in doing that project, I was looking at a lot of neighborhood change and development and trying to talk to residents primarily, and had not the easiest time really piecing those stories together. And so this project was a real, a critical way of how I was able to do an intervention there. So a lot of this happened on Facebook, actually, because I was constantly trying to reach out to residents, some of whom I knew, but a lot of people that I didn't know firsthand. And so there was I was doing investigation at Brownley Heath, which is a housing development in Jamaica Plain near Jackson Square. And if any of you know that the development is very auspicious and important, because in 1971, the residents at Brownley Heath were able to incorporate as a tenant management corporation and took over the management of a development that was in disrepair, that had a lot of problems, and that the Boston Housing Authority just was not really doing a good job of managing. So another example of residents kind of taking control of their own destiny, if you will. So this is a group of Brownley Heath residents that have this Facebook group to try to keep them in touch with each other inside the development, and some folks have moved away. So I was trying to get them to try to talk to me, and I couldn't get anyone to talk to me. And so I started posting pictures that I had found at the Boston Housing Authority. They were unlabeled, untagged, and then some pictures from the Boston Public Library to kind of get to engage folks. And as soon as I put the pictures up, here they come. So not so much in this capture, but maybe the next one. Okay, so some people find out about it, some people start texting. I start texting some young people who are hearing about it and pulling them out. Yeah, about the next one. And these young people start asking questions about kind of, what am I doing? What am I looking for? And I said, well, you know what? I'm trying to learn about the history of this development and the neighborhood. And I have some pictures that I don't really understand, and I don't know where they're from. Maybe you can help me. So that is, oh, sorry, that is Bianca and Nick and Walter and Malik, and these became my co-researchers, my co-investigators, very much. So they knew the community. They were young, right? So they didn't know all the history, but they knew all the people that did know the history. So they were the crucial link for me to be able to do some research there. Yeah, so just lots of texting, just showing another communication mode that was really important for this project, trying to reach them, trying to bring them donuts. This was going on all the time, yeah. Again, more meetings. We're just trying to get it. This is just the back end showing behind the scenes. Yes. Yes, you get the idea. It goes on endlessly. Next. And so then we start looking at these photographs. And so what I asked them to do was to look at some of the archival images. So the black and white image on my left, I guess, is showing you one of the images that the housing development itself had been collected. So there's a box of about 1,500 photographs that we found that were undated, unmarked. There was no labeling. And so I asked the young people to go through these, to go through the collection and to identify anyone that they knew, and then to maybe bring me a picture from their own family archive or their family photo album to kind of talk about it. So this is Malik's mom. He finds her picture in the box. He's stunned to find her a young woman in the middle of this celebration, which was really popular at Brownley Heath. It was the annual beer drinking contest, and so what they would do is they would put beer in a baby bottle, and so that's what you see. People are drinking beer out of a baby bottle, and the idea was you drink as fast as you can to see who could get the beer out. And so not enough to really, I guess, like get drunk or anything, but just a really funny and silly event that the community celebrated forever. And so Malik sees his mom there, and he's like, oh my goodness, that's my mom. And then he pulls this picture of her out of the photo album so we could just do a side-by-side comparison and also look more closely at the photographs. So yeah, so this became the way that this project kind of unfolded. Having the young people go through these archival photographs, start to identify people, then take the pictures on the road, talk to their family members, their residents, try to verify some of the images, then they would scan them, then we would talk about them, and then adding their own, sometimes their own baby pictures. That's Nick's baby picture up there, and trying to build out a family narrative that way, and then also to try to work into a larger understanding of the neighborhood's history. So this is just a close-up of that beer drinking contest. Again, something that went on at Brownley Heath as just a fun part of a family day for years and years. And whenever we would talk about this event or show this picture to people, people would just start laughing and reminiscing about what it was like in the summer and how silly and ridiculous this wonderful time was in the community. And then we found a lot of just everyday pictures that were really countering a lot of the really negative media portrayals of Brownley Heath as a violent, downgraded place. And a lot of the pictures from the residents were just everyday things, you know, hanging out outside, making a snowman. And so this family, there are a bunch of girls in here from the Smith family, which is a really prominent family in Brownley Heath, and a lot of folks in the community really had not seen any of these photographs, and some people had never seen these photographs, and a lot of folks hadn't seen pictures like this in a very long time. So it was a really wonderful, reflective moment for the community. Yeah, so the next couple pictures are just more of the images that we use to, again, bring the community into a larger conversation about their earliest days. Some of these pictures go back about 30 or 40 years. And just for me, again, the excitement of being able to do intergenerational history. So for the young people, sometimes they would look at this picture and find, and see their mom or see their uncle, someone who was at the time in the photograph younger than they were, and using that as a way to build out their sense of history, their sense of change over time across generations, and to allow them really be at the center of creating that new kind of narrative. Yeah, some action shots. And so in the end, what they wound up doing was narrating these photographs, doing some more research to build out the story of Brownley Heath and the development in and around Jackson Square. And then they presented this back to the community at a Family Day event. So taking this very historic moment of the Family Days, 40 years of Family Day, and then letting their new research be a part of a contemporary Family Day presentation. So it was shown during the evening time on a big screen like this. It was dark, we were outside, and they put up these pictures, and the community literally just started to celebrate and cheer and laugh and remember so much of what had happened. So it was a very powerful way for the young people to share their expertise. Okay, so 2 projects, lots and lots of stories. Lots and lots of different directions and lots of different pathways into story generation, and kind of flipping the script a little bit in the sense that people who are living this history and living the stories being the people who are crafting it, being the people who are interpreting it and presenting it. So the question here is just thinking about why this work matters for our city and for our history and for the way we think about our history. Certainly, The young people themselves have demonstrated their ability to create new histories of Boston, no question, right? And so it's an ongoing process for us, but there continues to be the need for new history in our city, even history that helps us explain the last 50 years, even, or last 60 years. How about, just the last couple of generations of folks who've been born here, just really wanting to get more of a sense of why the city looks the way it does, physically, what's the social story here, and how can people be a part of that. Really important for how we understand our sense of community, our sense of membership, and our civic agenda that we build out. Really important for thinking about youth leadership development. So there are lots and lots of young people in the city of Boston who couldn't tell you anything, right, about their families or about their neighborhoods, and yet they're connected to all the communities that we really care about and want to know more about. And so why not let them be the people who are bringing this history and these stories to light, and allow them to build their confidence and to build their speaking skills and their research skills. All those 21st century skills we talk about, this is a really powerful way to bring that out. The last piece is just the need to expand our archives. We need more expansive contemporary archives, no question. And we need folks who are on the ground gathering new primary source materials, new interviews, new images, new ephemera, what have you. And why can't young people really be at the forefront of that to give us really new understandings of a city that we think we know so well, right? So with that, I will stop. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope we can talk a little bit. Yeah.
Thanks, Karilyn. I will shift gears. I'll come around if anyone has questions.
Oh, okay.
Mike, I will.
Thanks. That was terrific and put a lot into a short time, but we could follow it. I'm wondering if some of the young people that you worked with in the past with MYTOWN, have any pursued history archives as a career option that they might not have otherwise pursued?
Absolutely, yes. So some of MYTOWN's alums, we have lots of them now. They're in their late 20s, early 30s, amazing. Some of them have pursued history as a major in college. Some of them, we even have a couple folks that have gone on to be history teachers in the Boston Public Schools. And so that part has been really exciting to see how folks have been able to really carry out that kind of a mission. Even Rakima, though she was more recent, she did a really important documentation of her family history just last summer and did this great interview with her great-grandma, and that wound up being really important because her great-grandmother passed away recently, and so the documentation that she did on her family history last summer has become even more precious for her family for obvious reasons. But above and beyond this kind of ongoing investigation with history, what I think is really palpable when I talk to former MYTOWN youth guys is the way that this experience has transformed their understanding of place and their connection to it. And so really having them think about what's going on in the community where they live. How can they make a contribution? Why is it this way? How did it used to be? So all of those probing questions that history kind of opens up for them have really translated into kind of deeper engagement in issues of social justice, civic engagement, all those kind of things. So I count that as a really high metric for the impact of this work as well. Yeah.
They just seem so very enthusiastic.
Yes, they do. Some days, yes, and then there are other days, but for the most part, they just definitely keep it going. Thank you.
Is there going to be a program like this coming summer? To train some other young people?
Right, that's a great question. So working on it. Would really like to see what we could do for the summer. Yeah, so I'm sighing only because actually at this moment we're really putting together the specifics for what the summer could look like, because there have been a few different variables in that, but definitely actually seeing the summer in a serious way to ramp up what their archival research had been from last summer, and also to do more outdoor excursion in different parts of the city, which is actually a conversation that Beth and I had been having, which is great. So just trying to think about what are other ways to bring in if a lot of them are saying how incredible it is to go to other places in the city, which is in other cities even, how to kind of exploit that as an opportunity for more work this summer. Yeah, it's a great question.
Hi. Hi. I have like lots of questions, honestly, but I'm only going to ask a couple.
Okay.
Have you considered incorporating, like, having the kids curate oral histories?
When you say that, can you say a little bit more about what you mean?
So by oral histories, I mean like sitting down with a video, you know, and doing the research and having the list of questions that they want to ask and getting it on video to add to your archives.
Okay, yeah, so yes, so last summer they did do a series of oral interviews with folks as well, and right as the summer was ending was just the moment where we started to look more closely at those interviews and think about what to do with them. So we have some video from those interviews. They have not done all the transcription, and then we had a conversation as to whether they should or not, but we definitely see oral histories and videoing of these things as an important part of what this can be. So yeah, just at the beginning of it, though.
That's cool. And have you considered working with public high school teachers to try to incorporate this into curriculums? Is that a goal? Or?
Absolutely. So we've been in discussion even more recent, in the last couple months, even with the director of social studies and history for the Boston Public Schools, and have begun to talk again more seriously about what that could mean in terms of civics engagement for a grade 10, and also U.S. history. I think is at 10, and then grade 10, and then it comes up again. So what could happen in terms of classroom research, in terms of actually getting some of those students outside, because BPS has just started to have their high school students do more kind of survey work or engagement in the neighborhoods, which has been new and great. Yeah, great question.